Thank you for joining us today. I'm Elliot. My job here is to kind of connect with the design community, understand what everyone's working on so that we can figure out better ways that we can help. And one of the things we like to say here at Zeppelin is I think we're all here to deliver on the promise of design. And part of what that means is scaling a product team efficiently. So for our users, that involves how to work cross-functionally, whether that's between designers, developers, and PMs, onboarding new designers, and also how do you roll out and implement change. And that's something that our guest here, Hugo, has a lot of experience with. Not only that, but also how the DesignOps function can help in that regard. So with that, I'll let him introduce himself.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Elliot. Hey, everyone. So I'm Hugo. I am a product designer by craft, but being invited here by Elliot and the Zeppelin team to talk about DesignOps, which is something that I actually moved on to start doing and kind of like focusing on for the past 2.5 years at Canva. So yeah, very, very excited to talk about how we've been doing DesignOps and how we've been growing the team, nurturing the culture, and making sure that we're creating the right space for the designers in our team to create the best design platform.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's jump right into it then. When you first joined Canva, you said that was like about 2.5 years ago. What was the state of design when you first started there?
Yeah. So I joined Canva, and I should have said, as I said, like I'm a product designer. I joined Canva as a product design lead for one of the, what we call there, the super groups that we have, the ecosystem super group. And when I joined, I was designer number 16. So very beginning, I want to say, not really the beginning, but like straight after the beginning. And then after that, we knew from the beginning, like when I joined there 4 years ago, I knew that we would grow the team, and that was actually already part of like that interview that I had in terms of like if I could support them. And I had some experience before. I was working and living in Berlin, in Germany, and I was working with HubSpot. And then at HubSpot, because I have moved with HubSpot and worked in Dublin as well, in Ireland, I was also kind of like touching the idea of growing teams. So I helped them to grow the team over there. So when I joined, the team was 15 designers, product designers. I think we will talk more about that, but we didn't have like all the, what we call the subspecialties in place yet, like design research and content design, digital design. Those subspecialties, obviously they already existed, and we had people doing that kind of job, but not necessarily inside of the org structure that we have today. So that was like this state when I joined the company, was still a small team.
Right. And so, obviously you guys have grown a lot, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to fast forward to now, kind of now that you've got like a relatively mature design team, DesignOps function, would you say for DesignOps specifically, what are like the missions and responsibilities that you have?
Yeah, definitely. I feel that DesignOps, as I mentioned, like we didn't have the organization of DesignOps or like the specialty of DesignOps before. And DesignOps in Canva, like, or at Canva, it was born like it came kind of like organically, and I felt that we landed where we are today quite naturally, which was quite nice to see that happening. There was a very strong kind of like sponsorship, I want to say, from the leadership. So the head of design at Canva clearly saw the need even when I brought it up, saying like, hey, I think I've been doing a lot of DesignOps work in here, and I think we need to start a team. There was very little, I probably should say, like there was no pushback in terms of like, no, we should not do this. So, and it's an interesting one, because every time that I talk to DesignOps people like that are working in different companies, people that I want to transition to DesignOps, there is always like that very first step that people talk about, which is like, oh, how did you get the buy-in to get DesignOps going in Canva? And I feel quite lucky and privileged that I didn't have to do much of like that part of the work of like selling it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that comes as well from the fact that Canva, if folks that are here read before or saw before, we are a company that are very design-led. We are design software. Our CEO has a very strong background in design, and so the value of design comes quite, I want to say, like embedded into the culture. So
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about like, hey, well, in the product design, we're going to have design ops. We need to optimize and make sure that the design team is getting everything that they need to get the work done. It was pretty easy to just kind of like, yeah, sounds really good. Let's do it. Let's get going. So yeah, yeah, that was like as I said, the beginning of it and how we got that going.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned, Canva is a design-led company. We're here at Zeppelin, we are too. And I think, it's maybe a privilege then for design-led companies to kind of ease into the design ops function. But I feel like maybe for not all companies are design-led, obviously. And so not all companies maybe have that sort of privilege or the ease and support at which they can move into design ops. And I feel like, one of the big areas where design ops helps is cross-functional work between designers, developers, PMs. So how does design ops specifically help facilitate that?
Yeah, there's a few things that we've been doing on that front. Just before I answer that question, I just want to make sure. I saw that somebody saying that there is an echo in my voice. Is everybody hear me well? I just want to make sure that. Is it clear to you there, Elliot?
Yeah,
Like, do you hear my
you're
voice
okay for
clearly?
me. Yeah, I
Okay.
think we're
Thanks,
good.
folks.
Yeah.
Thanks for. Yeah. So to your question, in terms of like how DesignOps at Canva supports the overall cross collaboration between all these specialties. There is at Canva, we have 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we launched internally what we call like the PDP, the product delivery process. I think it's something that majority of companies have their own way of delivering product. And after a good few years of Canva delivering product without, I would describe it like as an official process, we said like, oh, let's try to now document and pretty much codify the way that we do it. And we create this PDP that I mentioned. And when we did that, we worked very close to all these specialties. And when I say the word specialties here, I mean talk about like product engineering, design. We created a group of people that were what we describe like the craft leads. So if you think about like the head of design, the head of engineering, and the head of product, and we said like, listen, let's go through now and see what people are doing that is working really well, what is not working really well, what we believe to be something that we definitely have to do every time that we deliver some new features or new products, or some things that we just recommend to do. And we start to assemble this process. Then we went with this process to the actual teams, present that to them, obviously, and in a very organic way to make sure that everybody felt that they were collaborating into it. Validate a lot of that in terms of like, okay, allocating these parts, creating these stages. And the interesting part is that like our CEO also had like some really good opinions in terms of like the order and how for her, like seeing the way that we're doing that at Canva for many years, like she's like, okay, she had like really good opinions, as I said, like into the process. So then we launched it, and as I said, we've been with this process for a year and a half, and we haven't, I would describe like touched in terms of like officially changing and adapting it. We definitely, we've seen many people doing small variations or small tweaks to the process as they go through. And just now this year that we kind of decide to actually jump in again. And I'm working on an initiative right now just to review one part of that process, which is like the approvals part that we had before. But yeah, in terms of like, again, that process is the main key, is the key kind of like point or where and how we make the parts connect. So process is one thing, but then there is also, I should mention, the culture side of it. So at Canva, I think since the beginning that Canva started as a startup, the three specialties here that we're talking about, design, engineering, and product, have been very close together from day one.
Yeah, naturally.
So yeah, and it feels quite, again, like it's a very lucky place. It's not like Canva didn't start with, oh, Canva was only designed by engineering. No, Canva was only just like led by product, and we had to shift the whole thing. No, there is, it sounds a little bit kind of sometimes like when I say like, oh, at Canva, we are really, there is really like space for everyone on the table. I'm generally speaking, I think there is really like this space for all these three voices. I think I talk a lot about the three voices and about these three specialties, but I just want to be very cognitive here that we do have the fact that behind these three specialties, there is these subspecialties like design research, content design, as I was saying before. They're really important, and they don't get dimension, and as we're talking the overall process, but just want to make sure that we also think about those specialties because they are really important, and especially when you have a big team, you really need to ensure that everybody has kind of like all these disciplines get their space to bring their craft and make the process work.
Right. That's like you mentioned the three design, product, engineering teams, I think. And that kind of calls back to what makes me think that if you need to garner support for a design ops function, you may not necessarily have, like, it's important to get the heads, like you mentioned, getting the head of product, the head of engineering, the head of design all together, figuring out what they need in unison, and then bringing that up to management or to the executive and saying like, this is why we need design ops. So it's like important to have everyone united on that front first before so you can get more support that way, I think.
Oh, 100%. There is definitely this idea of Canva came from a place that it was very flat in terms of structure. And if you look at Canva today, even with the size and the scale that we have today, we still have a lot of the flat structure in place. And it is a debate that we have. It's a conversation that we've been having for a couple of months, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to continue to have. Sorry, I'm not sure what is happening here.
No,
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I was going to have to find some way to distract everyone, so I'm glad you're back.
No, you're good. You don't need to put in entertainer hat there.
Yeah. So I think we lost you around. You were just talking about bringing together like those three functions: design, product, and engineering. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying about the flat structure. So Canva has like a very kind of like structure. We've been discussing about like the pros and cons of keeping the flat structure or not. But that flat structure has been very valuable in terms of like allowing everybody to be able to voice what they need, what they want, because the hierarchy is very low. So there is no such a thing as in kind of like, hey folks, I want to propose a change in the process, change in the product. There was never like that level of hierarchy where people need to go like many layers to kind of like get that to the point where it catches attention from somebody who can make a final decision. Until today, we have, I want to say, like even our CEO, who is somebody who is really involved in the product, she really has her hands on the product. She's always super open to work with anyone in the team. Like people definitely have this space that they can Slack her directly and say like, listen, I woke up with this idea and I would love to bounce an idea off you to see what you think. she's always super open for that. And that's one of the perks of working, I want to say, like with a company and with a founder that is really kind of like interested and focused on really delivering the best experience, like design experience for the users, because you get that space to talk and see your ideas kind of like being considered at any stage.
Right. And I would imagine for companies that maybe don't have the advantage of having such a flat structure, that still having the design team lead, the product team lead, the engineering team lead all unified, that kind of helps flatten the structure in and of itself, if they can all agree on the reason they need like certain things from design ops.
100%. And I should say as well, Elliot, that obviously not everything are flowers, right? Like, I mean, we do have also the fact that the team it's a big team now. Alignment is something that we struggle as well sometimes, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but we try as much as we can in terms of like direction of the business and how we ensure that everybody as well is like aligned to deliver the right things, like the right priorities. The way I think it's probably like it's a good context to set to everyone listen to us is if you think about Canva like as a large kind of like product or digital experience, we divide our product like in macro areas, and those macro areas like they are owned by what we call super groups internally. And then these super groups, they divide the work or the space that they own into smaller areas. And then we have groups, which is a second layer. And these groups divide once more, and we have teams. So it's pretty much like we have super groups, we have groups, and we have teams. Inside of these teams, that where you see here is that where you see the individuals, like the designers, the product managers, you see the engineers, and in each one of these entities as well, like the teams, the groups, the super groups, they have what we call the triads, like the engineer lead, the design lead, the product lead, and they all kind of like decide, they build the roadmap together, they build like what's working next, the priorities, they decide all together. And that, as I said, goes up on that kind of like from the teams to the groups to the super groups. And then Canva has as well like big foundational goals that really help us to align, because like, and these goals are around like revenue, around like the monthly active users. And that helps to kind of like align the product. But yeah, I just kind of like mentioning the structuring here that we have today at Canva, just for people to understand how product works internally. Right. But again, what was your question? I think you had something about DesignOps specifically.
Oh, it was just like in terms of, I think I was leading off of when you were saying like you're benefited by this flat structure at Canva, but just in terms of being able to gather support from the higher ups, whether or not you have the flat structure, I think it helps to have your three teams all on the same page. And obviously you mentioned naturally there'll be some disagreements, but I think if everyone can come with a more or less unified opinion, then you get a lot more support that way.
Oh, yeah. 100%. As you said, like, yeah, it's just this space that creates, and DesignOps is it's something interesting at Canva as well, because DesignOps is quite new. It's just 2 years old inside of Canva as a small unit. But I should say as well, Elliot, I just want to clarify that when we talk about DesignOps at Canva, I'm talking specifically about product DesignOps. So it's like DesignOps for the product team. But I should have mentioned probably at the beginning that we also have DesignOps at Canva in a different angle as well. Like, so Canva design team is much larger than just product. So product is just one arm of design at Canva. So I like to say that, like, if you think about design team at Canva, we have 3 major kind of like, as I said, arms in here. We have product, That's where like all the product designers, all design researchers, content designers, digital designers sit. And then we have the creative and brand team. So these are all the folks that work in marketing, work in on the brand aspect of that. It's a very kind of like wide subspecialty inside of Canva, because we have from graphic designers, brand designers to videographers, animators, like all working in there. And then we also have like this third arm that is, it's actually one of the largest, which is the visual content design part of Canva. So it's like the designers, majority of them are graphic visual designers that work creating the templates that you see at Canva, create like all these design graphic elements that you see at Canva. And that part of the organization, they also have DesignOps, quite, I will describe like in a very strong way, because you can imagine the production of like thousands and thousands like of templates. It's something that we really require process and require like an operation system behind. So that is also a design team, and also has a design ops team focus on that. So just to clarify, when I'm talking about design ops at Canva, I'm really talking about product design ops.
Yeah. So we'll dive a little more into like your specific, the product team. And we've touched on a few of the like key, what I think at least are the key fundamentals of design ops, is getting support for design from management, and also maintaining like solid structure. And we can go, I think we'll go into structure a little bit later, but I think a big part that you had specifically in design ops is growing your team, onboarding new designers. So early on, you know, you said you joined when they had 15, 16 designers. What was it like onboarding them, and how do you make sure, you know, you said you also touched on your culture at Canva. How do you make sure that that culture stays intact as your team grows, making sure that designers are productive and happy? And then I guess building off of that, like what are some root causes of, I guess, frustration in like growing product teams as you guys grow, and how do you avoid them?
Awesome. That's a very big question. Let's try to answer all of that in here. But so I think, the hiring, like, I think like one of the things that a lot of people ask, and I know that we discussed this before, Elliot, like what is to scale a team from 15 to over 100 designers and like over 100 people? The first thing that comes to mind is, I want to say the first thing is interviewing. There's a lot of interviewing that goes into scaling a team. And interviewing is something that I feel a lot of us rely on talent acquisition teams, recruiting teams, hiring teams. At Canva, I feel that we definitely have a very defined seat in terms of like how we do the hiring and how we do that process. So, for example, when we started doing that hiring, and especially because we knew that we would have to do a lot of hires in a very small period of time, we had to work on, for example, like deciding how we would do the assessment of these designers. Are we going to do like design exercises? Are we doing whiteboard exercises during the interview? So that was one of the first tasks that I tackled like for the process. We decided to go with the design exercise, like the take-home exercise. We still have that. It can be a controversial point on its own, but it's for us, it has been very helpful and very effective. Then I feel what I was saying about like the interviewing, it's a lot of interviewing. I sat in like, if not all, like majority of the interviews of like this 70, 80 designers that we hired. And I feel that even though that can be time consuming for design ops, it felt really, really good now looking back, because I feel that you start to get a really good vibe of the people that are coming to the team, and being able to translate all that I would describe, like all the goodness that you see in those candidates, in those new folks that are joining the team. You start to bring it to the team and kind of like embed that into the culture of the team. Then the second part, what you asked me, was about like the onboarding. So onboarding at Canva, when I joined, I was quite impressed with the onboarding that Canva has set up, I think, for many years ago, and we continue to iterate on that. But for design specifically, we have done some tweaks and adapted that a little bit in terms of, so at Canva today, like everybody who joins Canva, they are assigned to a coach. Instead, like we don't use the word managers, but it's the equivalent. So like you're gonna have a coach that will help you to grow and develop yourself, your skills. And then we also assign you to what do we call a buddy. So somebody who's going to be with you for the first 3 months, really to kind of like help you to get, what do we describe, like the kind of a context, like understanding how, like what are the bits of the business that you need to get your job done. And then we have the culture of like making sure that these designers, they feel that they have the space to really apply the craft that they were hired by. This is something that we, as I said, like when we didn't have that process, the PDP that I mentioned before, we really encourage people. And I think that's another in reflection here, another key for growing a good team is like, if you're starting with a small team and you're going to a big team, you're doing a lot of hires, and these people, they're all coming with really different experiences, different backgrounds, different processes, different techniques. And you really need to give this space for people to actually show those techniques, that experience that they had. And I think the fact that we didn't have like an official process when people started at the beginning was really good, because it allowed, like, you create that space. As I said, like we would tell people like, listen, we hired you because we do need to bring more ways of doing product and making products. So bring your ideas, I was going to say, like, bring your ideas, bring your templates, bring your processes. We want to hear about them. And I think that in itself helped us to build a really collaborative culture where people felt that they have this space to collaborate and to design the process that one day would be implemented. So that built the foundation of that team. So if you think about from 15 to probably like 40, 50 designers, that sense of like, oh, I'm joining this company, I'm bringing all my experience and I can talk about it and I can share that with everyone. It was really strong. We still have that today. We still encourage people to share their ideas, their processes. But at that time, it was much stronger because it was a smaller group. You could literally get people in a room and say like, hey, today somebody going to share like how they have been doing this and that in different places. And then moving on to the other point of your question, Elliot, in terms of like what are the challenges that we have growing and scaling a team. One of the biggest challenges that we still have, and I think we're going to have for a long time at Canva, is it's actually like on the product itself, like on the way that we make product, is Canva has built its reputation as a brand based on the simplicity and the ease of use of the experience. And as we grow a team, we grow obviously the production of new features and how we produce, like how we improve the product. One of the challenges that we have is simplicity, keeping that simplicity of the product. And because obviously a lot of people touching the product, a lot of people thinking about how to improve the product,
right, different
ideas. A lot of ideas come through. Yeah, exactly. So it's really hard to kind of like, how did we keep that simplicity? And that's something that DesignOps, we do look very carefully, like how can we get the team to think and prioritize simplicity?
Even though there's maybe 100 plus people there.
That's correct. Yeah. And how can we say, like, how can we find the same definition of simplicity for everyone, right? Because I think you can think about simplicity in one way, then the other person comes like,
Right.
oh, this might maybe simple like for this feature specifically, but when you put it all together, this is not that simple. So we talk a lot about simplicity at Canva. And again, as DesignOps, we try to really double down and work with the team of like 100+ people to talk and kind of like show the examples of like what is simplicity is, how do we envision simplicity, where simplicity is happening, where simplicity is not happening. And I give you a very, very practical example in here. So just that a session that we had that worked really well for quite a long time at the moment is kind of like on the low, like we're not having that as often as we had before, but it was like literally like the simplicity sessions. This was a time where, because we got to a place around, I want to say like 50 designers, where we stopped doing design crits, which is something that every team does. We stopped doing that as a specialty, as a design team, because it was just too large. Like the team was too big and we could not get everybody in the same place. So we kind of like spread that, and design crits today are happening inside of the super groups, inside of the groups. So they don't have like overall. But one of the problems that we had with that was that designers start to have, or they stopped having that alignment to understand of what's happening on the other side of the product. Because they didn't have a visibility anymore. The crits was something that was really giving them the visibility. They would sit every 1 hour a week to kind of like see like, oh, I'm working on feature A, but Elliot is working like on the other side of the product on feature Z. And we missed that opportunity for people to see each other's work. And so that was the moment where we implement this simplicity session. So simplicity sessions, the way it works is like, at Canva, we look at the entire experience. We say that like there is 6 verbs that happen inside of Canva. So if you think about like there is the moment where people are discovering the templates, then there is the moment where they are designing the templates, then there is the moment where they are sharing the templates, and there is the moment that they're sharing the designs. There's the moment that they are publishing it, the moments that they're collaborating. So all these verbs that we use, we do the simplicity session saying like, hey, simplicity session this week will be focused on the verb collaboration, for example, like to collaborate. Anybody who is working on any collaboration feature, if it is commenting, if you're working on sharing with somebody, you come to this session and just do a show and tell, like just present what you're working on. And that was a session that, as I said, like went on for a really solid 2 years, like with the team, getting together on a specific part of the product or a specific concept of the product, and brought that alignment back. So I think that's where, just to clarify, like one of the challenges that we have, and one of like the places where DesignOps can come in and create these sessions, or like facilitating these sessions to really help align the product, align the team into one single goal.
Right.
But yeah, so that's the kind of like long answer here to this question. But
no, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm sorry for giving you that like 3-part question as one. I appreciate you sticking
that's
with it.
all good.
Yeah. No, so you mentioned, team alignment is kind of like almost a pain point, as obviously as teams grow, they get bigger, they get much more complex, and it becomes harder, even I'm sure with like even having the sessions, like if a team of 120 people, it's hard to have sessions, amongst them all the time. And that's like a pain point that we see with our users here at Zeppelin too, is kind of how do we, even outside of the sessions, how do we maintain alignment? So that's something that here at Zeppelin that we resonate with, and we work on a lot of features to handle that as well, just like that cross-functional collaboration. Yeah. And so, go ahead if you had anything.
No. I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I can imagine that. Like, I think like a lot of companies have this issue, and as I said, I right now I'm believing that this is an issue that are going to be there forever.
Right.
It's not like one thing that it will fix. I think one thing that I say all the time is like, working on a company that is growing super fast, that is going through this hyper growth, one of the things that you really need to be comfortable is about reworking, because your working processes create new ways of doing the job, and then literally like 3 months in, 6 months in, the number
Mhm.
of people working with that process doubles, and you're like, ah, no, this doesn't work anymore. Let's tweak this process again, and that keeps happening like in cycles. So alignment doesn't go differently. It's like,
Right.
oh, to align 20 people, we do this. And
Hmm.
then now that we need to align 40 people, we need to do this. And now
Yeah.
to align 80 people, we need to do this. So it's
Right.
like it keeps changing the way that we do it.
Yeah, I would imagine like at some point, you need like both the design ops approach like involves, as you mentioned, at Canva at least involves like doing like in-person sessions and stuff like that. And I'd
Yeah.
imagine there's also some tooling that would need to be seen as well in terms of like managing back and forth. So yeah, that's a great point. I do want to talk about, you mentioned like changing processes, right?
Mhm.
And like, how do you manage to make those process changes when you're at, now 120 plus designers? How do you make sure that when you enact a process change, how does that get implemented? And when you're
Yeah.
rolling that out, like what are some of the common pitfalls, I guess, that you see that you try to avoid when you have such a complex team and you're trying to change your process again?
Yep. Um, there are a few things in here. I think there's some learnings that I definitely want to share, and I will try to be a little bit more succinct on my answer so that we can cover a little bit more, because I know that I tend to just like expand on my
Oh
answers.
no, it's great
But
information.
but I think there's two ways that I look about change management that can really help the team. One of them and I think at Canva we've done in a few ways. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. So one of them that I feel that doesn't work, and I'm, as I said, start to believe that it's just like it's hard to work by the way that it's rolled out. When you do a process change and you try to do just literally like change the process from one day to the other and
Right,
just
right.
put that into the team, like it will just not land well for everyone, especially
Hmm.
when I think like it can work when you have like a very small team that's like,
Yeah.
hey folks, today like we are 5 of us. Today I had a really good reflection last night and I felt that we need to change this. And you can have that conversation, and I think that could work. Otherwise, it's just like it will land flat on the eyes of some people, and that will make it very difficult to implement. But in terms of like what I felt that worked really well is it's really bringing, and I want to say like everyone during the construction of this new process. So like as you go through, even though that as sometimes as a design ops lead or design ops person that you are collecting a lot of insights and you are connecting these insights inside of this new process, and it might make 100% sense to you. Uh, Having people to realize and make those connections themselves, I believe that it will be like really helpful on implementing a process. And in a more practical way, the way that I see that is like, uh, I really believe on running a lot of sessions and workshops with the teams and kind of like let them to really add their stick notes with the ideas that they have and seeing how other people are thinking, more than actually me saying like coming to them and say, listen, I know that you think like this and the other team thinks differently. Like there is a very different dynamic that happens between when you let them do that by themselves in the same room doing the same, like adding, as I said, like a stick note where so that collaboration on building a process, in my mind, is a key. And I feel that some people may say that like it takes time from the team, and we should avoid design ops should do that. I feel that there's a lot of value that comes from that collaboration. So I still believe that
Hmm.
it's important, even that consumes some time, even that you need some investment into it. Uh, it's really important to bring them into this journey of how you're building this process, and also the idea of like instead of like doing a big bang in terms like how we're gonna launch this from tomorrow, from next week, we do this, and things gonna change. Like, go piloting everything, like, and kind of like go kind of like, hey folks, you try this, is that working? Hey folks, this team here is working on this, it's working this way. Like, how do you feel if you do this? That kind of like more organic way of rolling out the process. I believe that helps a lot in terms of like getting changes. And also, as I said, like there are a few things that will need to be implemented in the other way as well, that it will be like, hey folks, we need to change this in a very dramatic way, and we need you to understand that why we're doing this change. And put it away, I think a good example of that is something that I have in my memory, like of years ago. I think some people will remember, like when Europe launched GDPR, that you had to kind of like just work on like the changes on how you collect personal data. And there was some like a change that has to happen, and there is no time for people to collaborate on how we're going to do that. So in that case, like, hey folks, we need to do this change, is for these and these reasons. This is the way that we are doing this change. We really hope that this works. If it does not work, we will iterate on that. But from that date on, from Monday on, we will need to do things like this. And we will be like asking people to check and hold each other accountable on that. So I think there is a space for those changes as well. But for me, it's still, if you're doing a major change, or if you feel that things are not working, collaboration will be the key for making sure that everybody feels comfortable and adopting and working as well.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. You know, you've mentioned a lot of kind of like hands-on processes for design ops, where I think design ops and us here at Zeppelin, we both align, is as the team gets bigger, things get more complex. And you've mentioned a lot of good design ops practices to cover that. I'm curious if there's any other, like on the tooling side, like, you know, things that you would like to see, or things that have worked well for you in terms of processes and tools for the design ops practice.
Yeah, definitely there is. And I think, again, we mentioned that in previous conversations, Elliot. I mentioned that, like, now that I've been working design ops, I definitely feel that there is a space there for a design ops tool. And I think that is a mix of like many tools, like it's kind of like a bundle of many tools, like, because we do a lot of like project and program management. So you can imagine that like it would be really helpful to have a tool that does like the whole kind of like ways that you organize a project, like a Kanban plus like a page and a timeline and all that kind of stuff. But then there is also like tools that we use to do, we didn't even talk here today, but like, for example, like performance management, like how do we do the organization of teams? Like one tool that I still don't have a tool, and I feel that I'm at the moment like scrambling between different artifacts, is like, how do we clearly and visually see the organization of the team? So that structure of the team. When you are a team of like 100+ designers, it's really easy to lose track like on who is working where, and obviously you rely on the leads to kind of like carry that. But from a design ops perspective, sometimes I feel that I get these requests from a design lead that's saying like, hey, we need the new designer to work on this, and it would be great to have somebody that is already in Canva, like internal. And I would love to have this kind of like minority report kind of type of dashboard where it goes like, oh yeah, designers that have these skills, and I want to bring them here, connect to this one. This is a tool that we already, we don't have yet. And as I said, like I've been creating multiple artifacts to kind of like mitigate that.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on something very quickly as well that we didn't talk much today, but this design ops tooling that we talk about, it can go much deeper when you start to bring in the design research ops and content research ops, content design ops. Like as soon as you bring those, even like that other level of subspecialty ops, there is, again, other features that this tool would need that would be very helpful for research. For example, like how do we collect and make sure that all the insights that we have coming from research are in one place. And as I said, we have tools all separate, all in different places, but I'm still looking for the one that will connect all of them.
Right. And it's probably, you know, as you mentioned, you're using a whole bunch of tools. There's probably like a design ops tool set out there somewhere, right, that needs to be found.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And as I said, like I think like different teams, different companies, they will have different sets actually. But I find that there is a core part of it that I haven't seen yet, that is still missing. And I believe that probably, as I said, like it wouldn't make sense anybody to kind of like rebuild a tool that has all these features that I talked about. But it's more about like how do we connect all these features and all these products and that already
implement them
exist
within your team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, you and I could talk amongst ourselves, I'm sure, for another hour or so, but we should open it up for a Q&A now. So thanks for hanging in there with my questions, and we can check out some Q&A. I'll read this out to you with everyone on the screen as well. Does Canva have a dedicated research team or research ops function, or are they embedded in the design teams? I think you touched on this briefly.
Yeah. We do have, first of all, just to confirm, we do have a design research team, subspecialty, that lives under the umbrella of like product design. Obviously, the design research team is not as, I want to say, it's like not a one-to-one. It's like there's not a one design research for one product design. It's a smaller team. So we do have first like the discipline. And in terms of ops, we also have one person working in design research ops at the moment. So we have a team of 12, 13, around like between, I think like 15 design researchers. And we have one design research ops person that is working on that. This is the person that we brought like a year ago, and she's been doing like a brilliant job in terms of making sure, and we talk about like some of those tasks, like even managing the tools around research, managing how we do recruiting of research participants, and also kind of like working at the moment, for example, on building like a research insights library. So yes, to the question, we do have a research ops function.
All right, question from Tim. When growing your design team, how did you determine which disciplines were required to achieve your strategic goals? How did you prioritize them? And there are any sort of ratios, I guess, that you try to maintain within teams?
Yeah. I think to the first part of this question, the disciplines, I feel that when we started only with product designers, and these product designers, they had to be like the ones that do the whole thing. So it's like we always, especially like those first hires, we're all like, hey, you're gonna have to be doing design research, and we require you to do some content design. So it's like we had the awareness that the disciplines were needed. We didn't have, I would describe as probably like the space, the budget, and everything to create those disciplines from day one. And also, it did not make sense to create that from the beginning, like to literally like open up like now we're gonna have a design research team, and now we're gonna have a content design team. We always saw that like we opened that, and I think we opened it like when we were kind of probably like around 30, 40 designers, that when you start to see the need of having a team. And the reason that I say that is because before that, everybody's doing, and you can have like when you have 25, 30 designers in a team up to that point, you are still able, as a lead of the team, as the head of the team or design ops, you still have visibility of like where the skills are and where the skill gaps are. It's very kind of like, it's easy still to do that management of skills. But after that number, it becomes really difficult, and you need to start to get one person, like get somebody to start to focus on those parts of the craft. And that's where naturally you start to feel the need. So I think just to that point, if you're growing a team and thinking strategically, I want to say that the need for discipline is something that you need to be aware that will be a point that will come up. But I want to say that the actual trigger for you to start, it will be quite clear. Like it will be a moment where you're like, okay, we can see that a lot of people are struggling with research now, and we need to get somebody that will be able to hone the craft of research with this team. Mm-hmm. And then that's the moment where it's like, let's hire like a proper designer researcher, and as we start any discipline, any team, is like, let's hire a very strong person that can be the foundation of this team, and then you start to build from there. So let me see if I answer all the things. Just in terms of ratios, we do aim to have, I think this is a very common conversation in design ops, like between all the companies, is like we do try to keep like one designer for 6-7 engineers on overall product team. I don't think that's necessarily, like, we do have exceptions on that rule. Design ops specifically is something that I've been thinking a lot about when you start a design ops team and when you don't. There is, I want to say, like rumors around there that like when you hit like 40 product designers, mm-hmm. it's definitely the moment that like definitely that stage you should have design ops person. Mm-hmm. And I'm still thinking that like, well, you could actually, if you really want, you can articulate that even with 15, 20 designers, you already should have a design ops person. But pragmatically speaking, I think that, probably like around 30 would be my way to go. Like I say, like when you hit 30 and you don't have design ops person yet, you start to kind of, again, put that in your radar that you may need somebody to look into processes in a more focused way.
Before we get to that next question, that ratios point reminds me of a question I saw. When you mentioned the structure over at Canva, you have these super groups, and what's kind of like the roles that you look for, and kind of like the number of people in each of those super groups?
The super groups as well, like that's the way that they are created and the way that they are. It happens very organically, and it's always the idea that like there was a team one day that became a group, and then that group became a super group. And also we try to obviously limit the number of super groups at Canva, because we feel that if you have too many, it just becomes you cannot manage all of them. So, but the ratio of teams, I think it's a good point to start, right? Like if you think about, like, as I told, like there were super groups and teams at Canva. So a team normally is a group of like, I would say like around 7-8 people, average speaking, because like you're gonna have like a product designer lead, a product lead, an engineer lead, and then a few engineers. Then that team, so if you think about that org of like a team, 8 people, you get like maybe 3 or 4 of them, but that inside of like a product group. So in that group, you might have like, again, around 30 people working on that. And that's the moment where you say, like, now let's assign like a design researcher, a content designer to that group, so that they can work with those folks. So yeah, not 100% sure if I answered your question.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I guess this next question then, from Frank: what are the most important rituals for keeping the alignment between designers and collaborating on craft?
Yeah. So I mentioned about the design and the simplicity sessions, which I think is the key for alignment. We have one new ritual that we are running now, that I'm having really strong kind of like, I feel that I'm feeling confident that this is working nicely, is I've been calling that the design hives. So it's a moment where we get all the entire team. So if you think about the 100+ product designers, design researchers, content designers that we have in the team, we're trying to do that like once every second month, where we get all them together and we do a session that is kind of like a workshop, It is actually, sorry, a workshop where everybody gets in front of a whiteboard, obviously on Zoom, and we try to retro on something specifically. So that way, I feel that is the moment where everybody has the space to voice their opinion about that. So give an example that recently we did when I was doing this revamp of the approvals parts of process that we have. It was a moment where like everybody has like, hey, I struggle with approvals in this way, in that way, or I think that this works really well for my team, doesn't work for my team. So having a session where everybody can actually play, and then as I said, like again, doing that like stickies and throwing their ideas, it's really, really good. So design hives and the simplicity sessions are really good. And we have one more that I probably should mention very quickly is Canva. We have the concept, I won't go too deep into that, like reducing the amount of forks. And when I say by that is like especially when you think about UX, UI components, instead of creating more and more components that look similar but are different, we try to reduce the amount of times that the engineer has to say like, oh, let's build something specifically and let's just use the design system. So this is kind of like the way that we call it Canva. There is an internal lingo for that, but it's like the reducing amount of those forks is a session based on that. And that's the moment again that we will do a session that is very specific on a type of interaction. So for example, like everybody who is working on uploading images inside of Canva in different parts, there is like uploading image inside of the editor, there is uploading images in folders, there is images uploading via mobile, like everybody who is working on that. Let's get together and let's see what everybody is doing, and let's align that. Let's reduce the complexity and creating multiple variations of that. So I think these are the three rituals that I would mention in terms of like alignment and collaborating on the craft.
Right. So I think if it's okay with you, we can do just a few more questions, and I'll let you go if that's all right. You're all right on time?
I'm very happy. I can see that we still have a bunch of people and with questions. So if people have the time, I'm happy to extend another 10, 15 minutes here. If you
we can also, any questions we can't get to, we can follow up on later. Maybe do.
Yeah, I would love that.
Definitely. So this next one then, what are some of the biggest pain points you see facing design ops today? Just, I guess, a broad and general question.
Yeah. I want to say that like one of the biggest ones is on the tooling side, like as we mentioned before, like having, and I'm talking here about like the tooling of design ops, not design systems specifically. It's just because that came to my mind. That's one of them. Because I feel that there is so many areas, like at Canva, we think about design ops into three big buckets. Like we have the process and tools part of it, we have the people and culture side, and we have the craft and strategy side. All those three buckets, they have many projects that we need to tackle. And they all have, I want to say, like different stakeholders, different people working on it, different tools within those buckets. And we still struggle to kind of like, how do we get everything in one place that we can have that kind of like bird's eye view of everything? So tooling is one of them. And then I think there is like I just want to mention very quickly as well, the idea that as we are kind of like responsible on making sure that we're creating a very smooth experience for everybody who's working on the team as a product designer, there is human factors that we manage that make the job, I will say, like very challenging in a very like positive and interesting way. Like when you have to combine like analyzing, for example, team performance plus team happiness, and also I want to say like user happiness, because you need to keep an eye as well on how the product is doing, because like there is no point for you to have a very happy team performing really well, but delivering like a product that is not being loved or anything like that. There is that imbalance. So there is like all these things that you need to balance. I think that's a challenge as well that definitely deserves a lot of conversations and discussions with many people.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we do have to wrap it up. But I'll give you one last question, kind of just thinking towards the future, like whatever's next for DesignOps. Are there any trends that you see that DesignOps needs to kind of be aware of or fold into its practice? Anything like that? What's next going forward, you think?
Yeah. There's a few things that I see, and I don't know necessarily if it will become a thing, but like it's interesting seeing the shift that is happening. So design ops, specifically product design ops, is something that I'm seeing more and more product designers very interested in becoming kind of like in working in design ops. And I find it really good, because I feel that we are one of the crafts where that are really kind of like allowing to leverage the crafts into these roles. And I'm just to reiterate, like, or in another word, is like, if you think about engineers in the past, like majority, and I'm talking about like all the types of engineering, like the ops and the admin people working around these engineers, they were not people from the craft of engineers. And so they would be like very much focused on processes and the way that they do things, but they wouldn't have that kind of like craft knowledge. And I think that what I'm seeing now is like a lot of product designers, a lot of designers wanting to work in design ops because they feel that they have the understanding of the craft and they want to improve the processes that go around that. So I do feel that design ops, is more specifically product design ops, is coming very strong. And there is a huge space for people who have the craft and want to move into working on processes designed for designers. It's a really good space to think about.
Yeah, definitely. That'll be awesome to see someday. Everyone, design ops will be universal, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Well, thank you for taking the time, Hugo. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone else for joining with us. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to, and one way or another, we will figure out how to get those answered. Maybe it's enough for another one of these webinars.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you as well, Elliot, and the team in Zeppelin. It's been great just to kind of even collaborate with you to get here today and speak about this. I do want to just open to everyone that very open if you have questions. As you said, Elliot, if I'm pretty sure that you collect some of these questions already, feel free to send to me. We can answer them asynchronously and send back to the folks. But anybody else who has questions, feel free to as well to find me on LinkedIn and start the conversation. I'd be more than happy to continue the conversation over there.
Definitely. All right. Thanks again, everyone. And thanks again for hopping on with me, Hugo. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks, Elliot. Thank you. Bye-bye, folks.